And now, it's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law.
On this side of the law, on that side of the law. Who is right, who is wrong, who is for and who's against the law.
All right, welcome to The Law Show on CL 650. And today on The Law Show, we're talking about immigration law. Gordon Maynard and Alex Stojkovic join me. They're partners at MKS Law in downtown Vancouver. Have you guys moved yet? You're moving, right?
We're moving. We've moved. Our new address, Suite 900, 688 West Hastings. We moved on June 25th.
All right, so you've left Yaletown.
Yes.
And now you're kind of in the downtown core.
We are in the downtown
You must
core.
miss Yaletown, though.
Absolutely. Already 1 week there, and we're already struggling.
Well, yeah. Well, it's you must have a view, though.
We have a view, but there are no more patios to hang out at.
Well,
Not
that's
to
all
the
right.
same extent.
That's
We'll
all right.
have
You
to
can get a
search
cab
those all
down
out.
there.
Yes.
We left a lot of friends behind in
We
you.
did. We did.
So you are a boutique immigration law firm, right?
Yes,
so you have
we
the three partners, and then and so is this common in a major city to have a boutique like yourself?
In Toronto, it's not uncommon. There's probably 15, 20 versions of us in Toronto. In Vancouver, there's a handful. I would say there's maybe 3, 4 other firms that are comparable to ours that do a range of immigration and related matters like citizenship and that deal with border issues, etc., where we're focused just on one practice. I mean, certainly in other practice areas, there are many boutique firms that do just, say, family law or...
So I see here on one of your handouts to me is that you're one of Canada's top 5 immigration boutique law firms. So
Okay, so Canadian Lawyer Magazine had a 2012
so you've been ranked. Oh, good for you.
And we were voted by our peers as one of the 5 best in the country in terms of boutique firms, and the only ones outside of Toronto.
Oh, congratulations.
Some
Yes.
people might accuse us of resting on our laurels.
Top 5 in the country as voted by your peers. That's pretty good stuff.
Yes, they've done this since in 2014, and I noticed that we weren't on that list. I don't know
I guess
why,
you
but
didn't take them out to dinner
I guess
on
not,
the patios in Yaletown.
Although, as these things go, there was, of course, the obligatory Canadian Lawyer Magazine requirement that you then go and advertise yourself. there, but yes,
That's it.
so-
Yeah, okay, that's the way that works. All right, so now before we get into what the focus of our show today is, which is the border, what do you that's something obviously you get calls about when you're having people trying to cross the border and mistakes that people make. But you're dealing with a lot of times individuals and companies to get people in and out of Canada for work-related items, right, Gordon?
That's correct.
So it's a push-pull. How does it work? You're working for a company to pull somebody into the country?
That's right. And a lot of our work involves companies in Canada wanting to bring in skilled workers. They're going to have to come across the border and enter Canada and be given authorization to remain here and work in Canada. That may translate down the road to obtaining permanent resident status, maintaining the worker here on a permanent basis as a permanent resident of Canada. There's other situations that arise where people are looking at leaving Canada, not always voluntarily. Those are the enforcement issues. So the push-pull exists in immigration. We cover all those facets.
And you must work for individuals as well who may be wanting to come to Canada.
That's right. A big part of our practice is personal services work, although the corporate work is probably equal or same size as our personal services practice. And then we do also do immigration litigation. That's the smallest of our 3 practice areas, I would say, but it is there.
So we want to talk about the border. And from what I understand, and I think, has it been a good service to have this border TV? What's it called again? The
Border security.
Border Security TV show. I think has that done a service for Canadians to kind of look behind the curtain to see what goes on at the border?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it was designed for that. I mean, the way my understanding is how this show was pitched to the president of Canada Border Services back in the day was that it would be seen as an ability of doing some public relations with the public, explaining, what the officers have to deal with, both in terms of the challenges they face and the multiple number of statutes that they're responsible for. And it is true. I mean, Canada Border Services is a relatively new entity in the history of Canadian law.
What was it before?
Well, the question is how many other elements were they before? So basically in 2005, under some pressure from the United States to create something that was similar to Customs and Border Patrol, they took the revenue, the customs and revenue folk that were customs-based, customs and excise.
So
out
those are,
of
those are
Canada,
shipments coming across the border, those sorts of things,
yeah, those
right?
those folks at the border worked for Canada. It was called CRRA at those Canada Customs and Revenue Agency, CCRA, and they also took the enforcement wing of the immigration branch, which was part of Citizenship and Immigration Canada, who were in two different departments at the border, along with the Agriculture Canada inspectors, and moved them into one dedicated unit calling themselves Canada Border Services, so that all of the border functions would be integrated within one agency. The challenge with this, though, is that these different groups that were brought in together came from different corporate cultures. Some were government departments, others were actual agencies. Some
It's just straight policing kind of stuff, right?
absolutely, and some of them came from a culture of heavy judicial oversight, like our area, Citizenship and Immigration, where there is a established culture of judicial review and federal court oversight, to customs, which does not have the same or did not have the same level of judicial oversight. So those were kind of mashed together. Plus, you have responsibility for a multiplicity of different statutes, from agricultural statutes to the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, to various customs statutes, the Proceeds of Crime Money Laundering Act. These officers
Goes on and on,
who
right?
used to be specialized
Yeah.
now have to become sort of generalists on all of these statutes. And it became a problem. In the first 3 years after the agency was created, they had something like a 22% turnover annually in terms of officers at the port of entry, particularly because it was just too difficult to command all of these different lines of business.
So you had, there was a very broad but very thin knowledge base. Is that how you describe
that's
it?
the issue. That's the issue.
Yeah.
I think Gordon can speak to that. There's been some changes to that now, and they've brought back old legacy officers from the old days who have brought a certain amount of professionalism back into at least the immigration aspect of things.
Yeah, the transition to move the immigration enforcement into CBSA was particularly interesting. Back when that occurred, we were speaking with the Assistant Deputy Minister at CIC in Ottawa, and he was saying, you're taking people who are part of a facilitative culture as well as an enforcement culture, because citizenship and immigration used to have a right hand and a left hand. The right hand would bring people in and the left hand would throw them out in appropriate circumstances. So they handled both facilitation and they handled enforcement. When you took the enforcement people out of CIC and put them into CBSA, you created a culture that was only enforcement minded. They no longer were connected to the facilitation hand. And he said, I'm not worried about it now. He says, I'm not worried about it now. You're going to have people coming from the CIC facilitation culture, put them into CBSA, and I'm worried about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now.
What was the worry?
Where we are now. Well, the worry is that the culture is enforcement minded, and you no longer have the legacy officers who used to come from the facilitation side. So everybody in CBSA is basically indoctrinated into an enforcement culture. And
So can you give me
noticed
an
it-
example of the difference between, this is your world, so I'm trying to extract from you what the difference is between somebody who's enforcement versus these
Well-
legacy officers.
Well, let me give you an example. Because the Canada Border Services plays an integral role in the operation of law. So the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act is managed by both Citizenship and Immigration Canada, now called IRCC, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, and Canada Border Services. So that dual mandate creates situations where, for example, people can go to the border and apply for a work permit. So you could apply online, or you can apply at a consulate. Or you could, apply at the border in some instances. The difference is, though, if you go to the border and they've decided that there's something wrong with what you're doing, the fallback position is, okay, we're not going to give you a work permit, and by the way, we're going to find a reason to exclude you from Canada, give you a removal order, do something. Whereas if you had applied overseas, the chances are you'd be refused and told, hey, we've got some issues with A, B, and C, and then either you go and
clear it
address
up.
them or
Yeah.
you don't. But at the border, there's much more of a tendency to, okay, now we're going to detain you and give you a removal order and seize your passport. That's the difference.
It's that, it's not only the authorities that they have, it's the mindset that they have. I mean, I remember when I was young, and before CBSA was created, the people at the border used to wear white shirts, slacks, a tie. What do you see at the border now when you go?
It's a police force, really.
Yes, they wear a dark outfit, they wear the bulletproof vest, they've got the heavy-duty utility belt on, the CBSA lettering on the back. They
So
look
it's almost the
like SWAT team.
Americanization of our border.
Well,
That's
very much.
because that's what you would see when you went onto the U.S. side. That's the way they all looked.
And,
They're
and now
armed.
they have they're armed.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the
Yeah.
other big difference. Since 09,
And
they've
that's
been
only
armed.
recent. That was
2009.
yeah.
And little things have happened over the course. I mean, these things happen incrementally, you know, and they add up over time. But we've gone through 9 years of having a prior government, the Conservative government, that was very much law and order oriented.
Mhm.
You know, their policies were always enforcement minded, and it seemed to be a high priority whether you were talking about criminal law or immigration law. And so this got worked into the system as well over time. They changed the law. You know, enforcement officers are told that if you're dealing with a situation of an enforcement order, a removal order, the law used to say you should enforce it as soon as reasonably practicable. That law was changed to as soon as possible. Not reasonable and not practical, as soon as possible. All these changes add up. So there's an enforcement mentality. Bottom line, if you go down to the border and you have issues there, things can happen. They have authorities that just don't exist in other places, and they're willing to use them.
Well, Gordon, thank you very much for segueing into what we're going to talk about after the break, because we want to talk about what you can expect when you go to the border, what authority the border has in your life, whether you're coming in or trying to exit or being forced to exit. So what you can expect when we continue on The Law Show right here on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.